Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest, it's my honor and privilege to have Bob Burg as a recurring guest. I think this is the third or fourth time that I recorded a podcast with Bob. But, for our listeners, and I hope you all know Bob, he is, well, I'm gonna read your bio so I don't mess anything up. But Bob, thank you so much for being on this podcast. It's great to have you. And let me introduce you. So, Bob, you are the co-author with John David Mann of The Go-Giver. And The Go-Giver is one of the most fundamental books in terms of business books and how to behave, it's a behavior, it's a mindset, those are actions that you take. And if you follow the principles in the Go-Giver book, you're really going to be successful. But as Bob mentions many times, it has to be genuine and you can't fake it. But if it really resonates with you and you can apply that, you're going to be a success. So you sold over 1 million copies of The Go-Giver. That's well done. Very well done. And it has several parables in the series. And the third parable in the Go-Giver series is the Go-Giver influencer, which places on focus on people skills, which is very important. And you believe that it's more important than ever in our world to continue, as our world continues to be more and more, as the world becomes more and more high tech, we have to have those people skills and we have to be able to use them because no AI is going to replace that.
Right. No, you're right.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's always a delight to be able to speak with you. I always love getting a chance to talk with you. I always learn so much from you. So thank you.
Thank you. And likewise. So I'm going to include in the show notes the episodes that we have done before. We spoke about the Go-Giver. We talked about sales. We talked about different aspects that you're an expert at. But now let's talk about being an influencer. What does that mean?
Well, when you look at the word influence just on a very basic level, it's simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. That's by definition, that is influence. Now that's its definition, but it's not its essence. The essence of influence, genuine influence, as we would call it, is pull as opposed to push. As in the old saying, how far can you push a rope? And the answer is not very, well, at least not very fast or very effectively, which is why great influencers, genuine influencers, they don't push. They don't push themselves on others. They don't push their ideas on others. They're not push-y, right? You never hear people say, wow, that Tom or that Mary, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. No, she's influential. She has a lot of pull with people. That's what influence is. It's pull. It's an attraction. Genuine influencers attract people first to themselves and only then to their ideas. And they do this again through pull.
That's very interesting. So how do you pull people?
So you basically pull people by focusing on them. So the genuine influencer asks themselves questions such as, how does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their goals? with their needs, their wants, their desires, their values? How does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it solve a problem of theirs? How does it make their life better? How does it move them closer to happiness? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, as you were saying earlier, authentically, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment to our idea, as opposed to trying to depend on push, on compliance, right? Force or manipulation, or what have you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you do it in a genuine way so it doesn't look manipulative? And it doesn't, not that it doesn't look, so it's not manipulative.
Yeah. Well, people often ask, and I think it's a good question. They'll say, well, when you talk about influence, are you talking about manipulation? Isn't that persuasion the same thing? Well, no, let's look at that because it's very, very important. So if influence is the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, there are two basic ways to do it, right? One is through persuasion, which is a good thing, that's positive. The other is through manipulation, which is a negative, not something we want to do. Uh, What's the basic difference between those two concepts? I think this was defined or explained, I should say, beautifully in a 1987 book by Dr. Paul W. Sweats, which was titled "The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen." Though it was much more about listening than it was talking, but it was a wonderful book. And in this book, Dr. Sweat said, and I'm paraphrasing here slightly, he wrote, "Manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. It does not consider the good of the other party. It results in a win-lose situation. In contrast to the manipulator," continues Dr. Sweats, "the persuader always seeks to enhance the position of the other party." Okay. So really, when it comes right down to it, it's intent. Now, a manipulator, Adi, doesn't necessarily want to harm the other person, but if that's what it takes to get their way, they'll do that. They're very eye focused. It's all about them. This could never happen with a persuader. For a persuader, or who we would call genuine influencer, to feel good about themselves, they've got to know that the other person not only came away better off afterwards than they were beforehand, but they felt good about it as well. So we would define actually genuine influence. It goes further than just influence. Genuine influence is the ability to get the results you want when dealing with others while making them feel genuinely good about themselves, about the situation, and about you.
Beautiful. So why an entrepreneur should be also be an influencer?
Well, you've got to influence in order for anything to happen. Now, when we say an influencer, we're not talking about the people on TikTok or Instagram. I mean, they are influencers. They do influence people, right? They're able to move people to a desired action. But we're not talking about celebrity influencers who are, posting on social media. When we say influencer, we're simply talking about that person, that man or woman, that leader, that sales professional, that family member, that friend, whatever, who is able to help other people buy into their ideas and do so in a way that, again, benefits everyone involved. So you've got to be able to influence. You must be an influencer if you're going to somehow get your ideas accepted by others.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. So give me some examples of, we don't want to talk about the YouTube or the TikTok or the social media influencer. Okay, here's the face cream that I use, so you should all buy it, right? I mean, we've seen those that they influence that way to buy products or to do different things. Let's look at a real example of an entrepreneur that position themselves as influencers and what effect it actually created.
Well, let's take the sales professional, the entrepreneur. Okay. If you have a successful business where you have, you constantly have sales taking place, people are buying from you, you're an influencer. You're influencing. If you're a leader who has people on your team And these people are not just doing the basic minimum necessary to do, that they have to do in order to get paid and keep their job, but they're going above and beyond and making a great contribution to the company and so forth and to their teammates. You're an influencer, right? Uh, if you're a spouse in a happy marriage, you're probably an influencer. Okay, all these are great things. Okay, so yeah, it's by the general nature of who we are as human beings, we are influencing in one way or another. But we need to also know, and it's not just having a good heart that helps. Again, the genuine and being authentic and really wanting to do good for others. But we also need to know how to make it happen. Okay, and that's where the five principles come in, because it's a step by step on really what it takes to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And in the book, you describe it very nicely in terms of parable. So it's a story that you can follow. But let's talk about those five principles. So
Sure.
what's the first principle?
So the first one is to master your emotions. This is where it all begins, Adi, because it's only when you're in control of your emotions, when you're in control of yourself, that you're even in a position to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved. Now, I think we all know this, right? Yet, how often do we, based on what someone else says or does, do we allow ourselves to become upset, agitated, anxious, victimized, angry, right? And we say or do that very thing that, rather than move us closer to the results we want, has the exact opposite effect. Now, we know better than this, yet we do it. Why? Well, because we're human beings. And as human beings, we are emotional creatures. We like to think we're rational and logical, and to a certain extent, of course, we are, but we're pretty emotion driven. We make major decisions based on emotion, and we back up those emotional decisions with logic. We rationalize, which simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And we do that in order to justify our emotion-based decisions, or justify the fact that we maybe said or did something because we lost control of ourselves and, really did something very counterproductive. Okay. We rationalize this. Now, please understand, we're not in any way suggesting that people deny their emotions or forego their emotions. Absolutely not at all. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They bring us joy. They make life worthwhile. No, just understand the importance of being the master of your emotions, as opposed to your emotions being the master of you.
And what's the second principle?
Well, the second principle is to step into the other person's shoes, or as I like to call it, understand the clash of belief systems. What is a belief? Well, a belief is a subjective truth. It's the truth as we understand, as you or I understand the truth to be, which means it might be the truth, but it might, and most likely is, simply our belief, right? And we all live our lives according to our own unique set of beliefs. These beliefs were handed to us before we were ever old enough to be able to check premises and question them and so forth. And most of us, we grow up with a certain belief system, a way of seeing the world. It's unconscious. I call it our unconscious operating system, right? And not only do we have this, but so does everyone else who we deal with. The challenge is that as human beings, we tend to believe that everybody else sees the world basically the same way we do, which makes sense because it's all we know, right? How could it be any different? However, it's not true. They see things from and understand the world, including words, definitions, concepts, and so forth, values, from their point of view, from their belief system, and we do from our belief system. So in order to step into their shoes and get an understanding of where they're coming from, we can only do this through asking questions and then listening. Really, really listening with every inch of our body, of our mind, of our heart, really listen. And then even when, excuse me, even when they speak, when they say something, we need to ask more questions and go deeper because often, what they've said and what they meant isn't what we heard and understood. Because again, as human beings, we even define terms differently. So it's very, very important to step into their shoes by doing our best to ask questions, listen, and understand where they're coming from. A real key to ensuring that unnecessary misunderstandings don't occur is to simply ask the person to define their terms or explain what they mean. But we need to do this in a way, we can't really come out and just say, well, define your terms or, what, because sometimes people they may not even understand why we're asking because it seems so obvious to them. Why wouldn't we understand it? Or they could be offended by it, whatever. So we always want to use tact and diplomacy when we do this. So it might be something, somebody says they need a project completed as soon as possible, right? Well, what does as soon as possible mean? It could mean one thing to them. It could mean another thing to you and to 10 other people who hear it. So you might instead just say, Dave, just for my own clarification, when you say as soon as possible, is there a specific day or time you're thinking of? Right. And now they can say, yes, I need it by end of day Thursday at 5 o'clock. So now
that's what I really admire about you is your ability to ask those questions in such a way that it's not offending, it's not challenging, instead of asking like, what do you mean? Like, when do you want it by?
Right.
You just ask them very politely, is there a day or a time that you're thinking of? And it shows true, genuine interest.
Thank you.
Understanding. So that's beautiful. That's a beautiful way of asking that question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's principle number 2. What's principle number 3?
Yeah, this is to set the proper frame. This one is so important that when doing so correctly, you're really about 90% of the way to attaining the result you want. On the other hand, if you don't do it correctly, well, it's 90% the other way. So what is a frame? Why is it so important? Well, a frame can be defined as the foundation from which everything else takes place. And that's why, if you set that correctly, right, well, now everything's smooth because it's all coming from that premise, from that foundation. My favorite frame story, and I don't know how many times I've told this story, and this happened years ago. It has nothing to do with business yet. It has everything to do with the concept of framing and how it can be applied to business. I was at a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant, and there was a little boy, a little toddler, 2.5, 3 years old. He's running around the restaurant having fun when his parents call him over to their table. So he starts to run over, and he slips, he takes a spill on the floor. Now he wasn't hurt, you could tell, but you could also tell he was surprised. He was shocked. This was not within his realm of experience. So the first thing he did was he looked over at his parents to get their interpretation of the event. Okay. What happened. He wanted to know, what does this really mean? What comes next? Is this good? Is this bad? Right. So I'm watching this, Adi, and you could just tell that had the parents gotten upset and panicky and, oh no, my poor baby, are you okay? He'd have started to cry. But what the mom and dad did is they just handled it beautifully. They walked over to him quickly, of course, but very calmly, very serenely. And they got down on his level and they looked at him and they smiled and they even laughed and they said, "Oh, how fun. What a good trick that was. Can you do that again?" And the little boy began to laugh. Now, what the parents did is they set a productive frame from which he could operate. So rather than having to remedially answer objections, dry his tears, no, it's okay. Oh, don't worry, right? No, they set such a perfect frame for him that wasn't necessary, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, it's really one of my favorites. Now, here's the thing. We can always set a positive frame. The way we approach someone, our smile, our body language, our words, that's fine. That's easy. The question is, what happens when the other person comes to the table in an already negatively set frame. Because if we buy into that frame and operate for, well, let's just say, for example, and we'll use the story of a realtor maybe who's taking a real estate listing at a potential client's home, and he can tell that there's sort of a tension in the air, you know, and he doesn't know why, but he's just kind of listening. And finally, they come to the table, the husband and wife, and the wife says, "Listen, you're the fourth realtor we've spoken to about possibly listing our home. The other three were absolutely obnoxious. They were telling us why we had to do this, and they're number one, and we'd have to put it at this price, and blah, 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 and we've got it, and so forth." She said, "We just want to let you know, we're not going to be bullied into listing with anyone. We're going to make up our own, what have you." Okay. Now, that is an adversarial frame, if I've ever heard one, right? It's in their mind based on their experience or their perceived experience, because who knows how those other realtors were, but that's what the prospective clients felt, and that's what counts, right? That's what you're dealing with. So based on that, they're seeing this as them against the realtor. Now, if we buy into, as the realtor, if that realtor buys into that frame, what happens? Well, they become defensive. They start trying to justify themselves. They start over-explaining, or maybe they even get a little put off and aggressive and so forth. Well, either way, it's not gonna work out. So let's instead reset the frame. Okay. So it might sound, and of course, everyone will say it their own way, depending upon their own style. But it might be something like, "Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Mr. and Ms. Prospect, while I've been honored to list and sell a number of homes in this community, whether or not I'm the right fit for you, we simply can't know without exploring deeper and really discovering your needs and your wants and what you are looking to accomplish. So please know this conversation is for all of us to determine that. And if it turns out that I'm a good fit for you and we'd work well together, I'll be delighted to help you. But if not, that's also okay." So what you did is you reframe this from one of adversarial to one of allies who all have one goal in mind, the best for that couple. And that's exactly what they're interested in. And that is how you would
so
reframe.
important.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's how you would reframe so that you're operating from a place of strength and win-win for everyone.
Right, because what you're doing is you're creating your own environment. You are in control. You are become the director of the play as opposed to being the person that is being moved around by some other director that you didn't even agree
Right.
with them to be the director.
Right. Exactly. Great point.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that's also in sales. That's how you will be successful, is if you stay in control, but not control in order to manipulate or harm the other person. It's in order to keep it in the frame of mind that you need to be in order to be at your best, which I completely agree. Bob, this is incredible. So I want to leave the other two for our listeners to actually buy the book, because now they go, "What is number 4? What is number 5?" Okay, well, so go to Amazon, or where should they go to buy your books?
Burg.com, they can actually read the first couple of chapters for free if they'd like.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then
so
they can also subscribe if they'd like to my daily impact email, which I send out Monday through Friday.
and you should, because that is, Bob, you're the master of giving it away in terms of giving your advice, giving your stories. You're always there to help. And for those of us that were the go-giver, it's not, you help, but you're not helping without getting back, which is important, because that's a really good point that you make. And part of getting back is that feedback from the audience, is that the audience is actually using it, because when you're there to help others, you want others to then come back and say, "Hey, Bob, you helped me. I was framing it this way. Now I learned to reframe it, and life is better. I'm making much more money. I'm happier. I enjoy helping others." And I think that is how you pay it forward in terms of being able to help others. You're helping others to help others.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome, Adi.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, so people now know how to reach out, and I encourage them to do that. Thank you so much for being a guest here again. And I'm sure this is not the last time that this is going to happen because you're continuing to write more books. And when your next book is out, which will actually be a workbook about how to be an influencer, we're going to have another conversation so our listeners can then learn more about that, and then they will want to buy that as well. So there you go.
I would love to. You know me. I would love to speak with you anytime you want to speak with me.
Absolutely. Same here. Well, thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.